Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Whistleblowers Podcast. My name is Sam, and we will be joined by Mr. Cary later in this episode. And you know, he's not the biggest basketball fan, or we'll be joined by Mr. Cary later in this episode. And you know, he's not the biggest basketball fan or baseball fan, so we want to just get some good basketball and all those other sports notes in now before we are joined in by our good friend, Mr. Cary. I hope everyone is enjoying their Wednesday. All of my notes are coming from Monday, January 11th onward, so we are not as much up to date as the episode would, come out. So we're going to be missing Monday night's games and Tuesday night's games, but we will be talking about what happened from the week prior. We'll talk about what's going on Sunday, what we did to get us some more notes, because we are lacking our basketball knowledge as we've been in the past now. We spent our Sunday stream watching just some highlights. We were watching stuff up, getting some updates, learning about what happened in the world of NBA. But before we even get into that, I've got to talk about baseball real quick. The big trade has been made. The Mets have traded with the Cleveland Indians, and they have gotten Francisco Lindor and Carlos Correa. So I believe that's how his name is. Please don't get mad at me if I mispronounce it wrong. But that's a new starting pitcher and the new shortstop. Now, when it comes to the Mets, unfortunately, they are the Mets. I am so happy for the move. But when people put on a Mets uniform, it always seems to backfire on us, because the Mets are like this void of talent, basically. Like, people will show up for this, they'll show up for the team. They'll be ready to play. Like, look at Yoenis Cespedes. He came in like, yeah, we got our thing here for, the World Series run that he did. We didn't win it, sadly, against the Royals. But like then after that, like he kept getting hurt. He wasn't playing. He lost his talent. Curtis Granderson kind of the same way. He did it. Edwin Diaz comes over. He's not doing so hot. Robinson Cano came over. He's not doing anything. So it's like you put on this Mets uniform, you kind of lose your talent. So yes, I'm excited, but we got to see what happens first. We got to see what they actually do from here on out. So Stephen Cohen, he definitely is showing why he's being a very on top owner right now. He's doing what he can because he knows this team is better than what they should be. And you know what? That's good. That's awesome. I'm glad that that's what he's doing. But now we got to see what happens when the season rolls around. We got to see what they decide to do. So it'll be an interesting task to see when they come back in the spring. So we will hopefully, hopefully the Mets will be better than what they are. I mean, another note, DJ LeMahieu, he's kind of agitated with the Yankees at the moment, so he's not really in talk with them right now. So we might have more. Like, I know they said they might go trade for Chris Bryant. There's a lot they can do. All right, now that we've covered the big baseball news that I wanted to cover, let's go into the NBA. So let's start with, before we get into any news here, like I wrote down some cool stuff I wanted to talk about. Let's talk about the standings first. So on January 11th, 2021, we have on the Eastern side of things, the Sixers are sitting on top of the East, followed by Celtics, Pacers, Magic. Now, out of all that, I mean, the Magic, they are a huge surprise. Like, yeah, they lost Markelle Fultz, but like Vucevic is still there. You still got Aaron Gordon. Like, you got some good talent still on this Magic team, but they weren't ready for that next step. They weren't really. I didn't think they were a championship contender team after watching them last year. I guess adding Denny was a good stepping for them, and I guess that got them over the top here, and that's getting them in this Eastern Conference. After that, now we have the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Knicks, Cavs, and Hornets. That rounds out the teams that would make the playoffs. But again, it's still early season. Like, this Knicks team have won 5 games. That's crazy already to think on its own that they won 5 games. That seems to be, Obi, I guess, coming in, starting to turn tides here. Like, that's something huge for the Knicks. And I guess Tom Thibodeau was probably the right coach for this team then. Like, I wasn't too sold on Tom Thibodeau. And clearly, this is proving me wrong that he's got this Knicks team like 5-5. They're at 500. That's perfect. because, you never expect much from them. Like, their best player last year was Mitch Robinson, but now you see Thibodeau's utilizing R.J. Barrett. He's utilizing Obi Toppin. He's utilizing Ntilikina as much as they can. And Julius Randle, he seems to have finally taken that step he needed to. Like, he was not doing what he did. He wasn't doing what he needed to do in Los Angeles or in New Orleans. Like, this seems to be his move. I think Tom Thibodeau is getting the best out of Julius Randle that we can see, and that's awesome for him because, that's good to, as a player, you don't want to bust out of the league. So he's been a good role player, but it seems like he's starting to step up a little bit here with Tom Thibodeau. So I'm not against it. He's doing really well. So now the teams that are not in playoffs, the Heat, they're 9 right now. The Nets and the Hawks. Out of all that, the Heat and the Nets are a biggest surprise for me because, like, the Heat, finals appearance last year with Jimmy Butler, and bam, I guess something's not clicking for them right now. And for the Nets side of things, I mean, you got KD and you got Kyrie. You should be doing much better. But I have a little topic about Kyrie and KD a little later in this talk here. But, like, that's crazy that they're not doing so hot right now. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the Nets should definitely be better than what they're showing. I know they're missing Dimwitty, who's been their good point guard when Kyrie or D'Lo or any of these people have been out. He's been a solid stepping stone piece for this Nets team over the years, so I'm glad they kept him. Following that, we got the Bulls, Raptors, Pistons, and Wizards all climbing up the rear. When it comes to the Wizards, I thought they were going to go to the playoffs and do better because they have Westbrook and they have Bradley Beal. Like, Bradley Beal's putting up, he's put up 100 points in 3 games now. And and this team is doing nothing for him right now. Like, yeah, Westbrook's here. He's doing what he can. But, this Wizards team is just terrible. Even, they lost John Wall, and you'd think they'd be better with Russell Westbrook, who carried a Thunder team, but he can't carry this Wizards team right now, so that's crazy. That's honestly insane that they can't do that. On the terms of the Hornets, though, I want to backtrack. I'm sorry. No, we'll get to that later. That's more news later. So yeah, the Wizards, the Pistons, who unfortunately I have no idea who's on that team. This is definitely a kind of step back year for them. Raptors, this is a step back year for them because they got nothing. And the Bulls, who got Billy Donovan, I feel like they haven't been able to do anything recently. But again, this is very early season. This Eastern standings can easily change in a flash. Like, it could change completely to whatever it can be. All right, let's move over to the Western side of things. The Lakers are the 1 seed at 8-3. I'm not going to do records, but the Lakers, Suns, and Clippers take the top 3 spots here, with the Jazz falling behind. Now, the Clippers, we'll talk about this more in depth in a little bit, but the Clippers blew a huge lead to the Golden State Warriors. And when I say huge, I mean almost as big as 28-3. So that's crazy. The Clippers did that. The Lakers are the Lakers. We got a game I want to talk about when it comes to them. After that, we got Warriors, who had that huge comeback. The Mavs, the Mavericks at 6. Trailblazers and the Thunder. Now, out of all that, the Thunder is the one I'm really that's a good one for the Thunder because they clearly were giving up everything for draft picks. They wanted draft picks on this one. And so I thought they'd be tanking for a bit. They would not be where they are, but they're doing pretty solid right now at 5-4. Yes, I know early season, we can't predict much right now, but we could see what happens later down the road here for them. It'll definitely change. Now, the people falling behind, we got the Spurs, the Nuggets, Pelicans, and Kings. The Pelicans and the Nuggets, I thought this would be their year that they step up, but the Pelicans, they're not getting it done. They lost some games. They lost to LaMelo's Hornets, but those are some games they should be winning. I know they're having probably a tough schedule, probably still recovering maybe a little bit from the bubble, so they might not be 100% there, but give it later in the time. We'll see what happens later down the road. The Nuggets definitely are having a struggle here when it comes to the season. I was expecting them to be a 2 seed, 3 seed, but they are not there. That's where the Suns are, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But the Nuggets are definitely taking a huge step back at the moment. And then holding up the rear, we got the Kings, the Rockets, the Grizzlies, and the T-Wolves. I mean, there's nothing too shocking there. The Grizzlies, They lost John Morant, so they're not going to be having any good luck there. The Rockets, they have no chemistry at the moment with Boogie, John Wall, and Harden. And the T-Wolves, they seemingly haven't done anything with all their people, so I guess we're still waiting for Anthony Edwards to just grow. Now, in this coming week, we have to talk about a few things here. The 76ers, they had to play a game with 7 players. Now, that's pretty crazy. Why did the NBA take any actions to let them get some players in time? Like, we talked about this when the NFL and the Denver Broncos had no quarterbacks, and they couldn't let this team go out and get some players real quick. But you know what? Fine. Tyrese Maxwell had a nice game. Hopefully, he'll get more of a chance, like I said, with Kendall Hunter, I think his name was, who played quarterback for the Broncos. I hope they give him a real chance here. Let him actually try. But you know what? That's crazy that they had to. So hopefully Tyrese Maxwell will get some chances after this. Hopefully they will. It'll be cool. Now, one of the games that LaMelo played during the week, he got a triple-double, making him the youngest player to get a triple-double in the league. It was LeBron. Then I think Luka was on there. Luka was on the last, was the youngest before LaMelo did it. Lonzo was on that list. It's crazy. He is going to develop into one of the greats in this league. It's going to be so awesome to see. And if the Hornets keep building around him, Michael Jordan seems like he's trying his best, but it's just not working out for him. Hopefully MJ can figure it out. He's a great player. I haven't seen much of him from any of this. Now, the NBA's response to COVID, the 76ers, they only played with 7 players. It's crazy. But when it comes to them, the COVID people, they've been postponing some games. They've been doing some issues here and there, but they're making things unpredictable. They seem to have no method for what they're doing. Honestly, it seems like the NFL was handling it better than the NBA right now. And you know what? This is crazy. They should have delayed a game a little bit, but they didn't. They let it play as is, and the 76ers had to suffer for that, which I don't think is fair for them. Cary. Now, we were talking about the Nets and what was going on with them. Cary and Kevin Durant have both been out. Now, Kevin Durant, he's been plagued by injury a little bit this season, so it's understandable. But Cary, yes, I understand the Capitol building got raided. I get the world is kind of a little crazy right now, but you can't stop working, sadly. This is your job. This is what you do. You're getting paid probably millions of dollars. Unfortunately for me, I can't. If I felt offended by that, I would love to have taken off, but I can't because I lose out I'll lose out on more money than anything. But that means though, that's not you can't do that. You're just setting bad examples. You're going and you do this a little too often now. Something bothers you and you take off. You're showing that the team you're not helping anyone anymore. You're letting down your teammates, and then you're letting down you're showing a bad example. Here, yes, I get it's an injustice. It's crazy that it happened, but you got to still show up. You could put a message out there while you play the game, but you got to show up. You got to be a good example here to the kids, because just sitting out because something is upsetting you is not going to make things better for anyone. If you want to make a stance, that's fine. But you cannot, just sit out games, because you're now letting down your team. You're letting down your fan base, and that's just not acceptable. All right, so we'll talk about the Lakers and the Rockets game now. I didn't really catch the final score. I know that happened a little during the weekend here. And so the Rockets here, DeMarcus Cousins got ejected for throwing down LeBron, but he also got into a fight with Marcus Morris beforehand. So definitely a little ill will on DeMarcus Cousins against the Lakers still, since he did get released for Marcus Morris, and he knows LeBron is the GM of this team, basically. But with that, though, he does got to keep his emotions in check. That was his issues with the Kings. He wasn't really playing for the Warriors. He was very injury prone, but he's got to figure out how to keep that in check. He's got to be able to be here for the team. He is still a great center. He's a great player. You can't get thrown out for stuff like that. I get you're upset. I get you're mad, but you really can't. That's crazy. You can't be doing that. The last thing I want to touch on before we move on, we'll be joined by Mr. Cary Krongard to go to our football talk. We have the Warriors. They had a huge comeback against the Clippers on the 11th. That was huge. I think that was huge for the Warriors, and pretty bad for the Clippers. I mean, the Clippers on the outside, they should not have been giving that up. Like they have Kawhi, they have Paul George, they have Lou Will, they have Patrick Beverly. They have so many great talent on that team. Luke Kennard too, and they should not have given up that huge lead to this team, like to any team at that point. They should have kept the pedal going, but they really couldn't. So Steph, Draymond, and James Wiseman stormed back. Like he was playing lights out, Steph Curry, and was having a day. All right, we will be back with some football, so just hang on tight. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of an intermission. We are now joined by our good friend, Cary. Cary, how are you doing today?
Sam, I'm doing great, and we have so much to talk about. Super Wildcard Weekend.
Super Wildcard Weekend. Before we even get into that, though, we just finished talking about basketball, and we have your game picks here. I want you to know you were actually 2 of 4 for this one now.
Okay.
The games you got right were the Clippers beat the Warriors, the Sixers beat the Nets, the Pelicans unfortunately did lose to the Hornets, and the Nuggets lost to the 76ers. But due to the severity of what happened that game, I'm not going to fault you on your pick because I actually would have picked the Sixers to win that too.
So I'm 2 and 4 overall now?
You're 2 and 4. Just to give you a little context, though, the 76ers had to roll into the game with only 7 players due to one of their players' COVID restriction stuff going on.
Yeah,
so they were screwed already.
That sounds like not enough.
Yeah, so you were actually 4 and 10 since we started having you do your picks.
So that is 40%?
40%.
Right? That's not terrible for Totally Blind.
Nope. So we're going to continue going with this Totally Blindness here. We have the Battle of New York, the Knicks versus the Nets. Who's taking it?
I'm so nervous. This is like the highest stakes part of the program all of a sudden.
It is. It makes it fun.
Knicks versus the Nets. I can't ask you questions, so I just got to go blind.
Battle of New York.
I'm going to go Nets. I'm going to go Nets. I feel like the Knicks haven't been good for a while.
That's fine. Now we have the Miami Heat versus the Philadelphia 76ers.
I have to transfer my hatred of Philly from football to basketball, so I'm going Miami.
I'm with you on that one. We have the Golden State Warriors versus the Phoenix Suns.
I'll go Golden State.
And then we have the Orlando Magic versus the Brooklyn Nets.
I'll take the Magic for this one.
All right. So now that that's settled, let's get into Super Wildcard Weekend. Cary, I think we're going to do this in the order that they presented themselves. So why don't we start with the Colts and the Bills? We both picked the Bills, I remember, to win this one, and they came through 27-24, winning their first playoff game in a long while. Sorry, not wild. The one thing I will notice, though, is the referees really tried to give the Colts the win on that one.
There were a few questionable calls. What did they overturn? What are you referring to?
What is it? When Zach Pascal, he was down, but he got up and lost the ball. But they were saying he was down by contact, even though his knee was clearly off the ground.
Yeah. They got an extra chance there, unable to do anything with it and get into field goal range through 4 incomplete passes, I believe. This game was actually closer than I expected. Honestly, I thought that this would be more like a 40-15 game or something. I thought the Bills would run away from it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I thought the Bills were really going to take this one.
But they didn't. Josh Allen did a good job, especially considering how little production they got on the ground. I mean, he was their leading rusher on the day with 54 yards and a touchdown. He had a good day. I mean, he again threw for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So the legend of Josh Allen continues to grow here. And for the Colts, it's sort of exactly what you would expect from a Philip Rivers-led team. That's sort of been the story of his career here, where he's able.
He fails in the playoffs.
He's able to keep it close, but they can't get it done in the fourth quarter. I mean, Rivers more than any other quarterback has been, he's sort of like the anti-Peyton, the anti-Brady in that sense. They just
it's crazy
to lose games late, and this one wasn't necessarily his fault. He had a pretty good day statistically. They didn't really have enough to get that many points on the board, but they did rally in the fourth quarter to make this a 1-score game. And then they needed a field goal, and they couldn't get in field goal range. I mean, that was
no, they really couldn't do it. It's sad. Look, you and I have been on the Phil Rivers hype train, but like now we have to really talk. Like, is he done now? Like, is he going to get another year? Is he going to retire?
Yeah.
What is the future for our boy Phil?
Well, I think that's up in the air for a lot of these playoff QBs. At least, we could ask the same thing of some other QBs that we'll get to later in the program
Yeah,
here.
once
No, they did.
once we talk about when they're out of here, we'll see what happens.
Right. And now, to the Bills' credit, they did hold Jonathan Taylor in check in this game. He didn't
Oh,
get 200
absolutely. The
yards.
defense stepped up, showing why they're a top 5.
So Rivers, it sounds like he's a little conflicted. I haven't. I mean, he has like what 9 kids or so. I mean, for him, it's always, he's been very kind of
9 kids, not
it.
cursing, so.
Yeah, he's been very week to week about. He's been like, I don't know, maybe it could be my last game. We'll see. But I think I think it's up to him. I think if he wants to play, they take him back. I mean,
Oh, they probably would happily take him back. Like they're not in the position to get a good QB.
No.
So it's honestly up in the air right now.
Right, and then you can shit on Philip Rivers all you want, but if not him, then who? And
By the end of the day, Phil still got the Colts to the playoffs. They weren't really ready for that next step, honestly, with the way Phil was playing all year. But he did what he was like set out to do when he got here.
Yeah, and I think he played better than most people probably would have, expected coming into the season. I mean, you can nitpick a few bad games here and there, which he certainly had, but overall it was a good Colts team, and just unable to get it done late here. But I like I like the foundation they built, for this Colts team. They were a team that wasn't, like you said, we saw them with Jacoby Brissett. They were too good a team to, to roll with a young or an unproven quarterback. So they brought in a veteran, and he brought him. I think his ceiling, Philip Rivers, his ceiling is low at this point, but his floor was a lot higher than anyone else would have taken them, and I think they'll take that at that point.
Absolutely. So honestly, it was a great season. Great season for Phil and the Colts.
And good win for the Bills here. Again, it was one of these wild card games, kind of a tight game, but they felt in control in this game. Allen threw the football well. I don't know where we are in the Colts defense. I mean, I think they fell off a little bit at the end of the year. They're still good,
they absolutely did, because they were number 1 defense.
Right.
And then once they hit their bye week, I feel like they started to kind of spiral.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But Zach Pascal was kind of the go-to guy this year, and I would expect more. I would expect to see the second-year jump from Michael Pittman next year, because that.
Yeah, hopefully, you know what, those guys. I was kind of shocked. T.Y. Hilton kind of vanished this year. Was Andrew Luck the only guy that throws to him?
It seems like it.
Yeah, so
but, he's more of a down the field passer, which Rivers isn't at this point in his career. And then Nyheim Hines had a really good day. Sorry to interrupt you. So
no, don't worry. I think we interrupted each other.
Yeah, I think with Taylor and Hines, you have a nice 1-2 punch moving forward. I mean, Taylor, when they drafted Taylor, I was shocked that he was not getting more hype, because everyone was, talking about DeAndre Swift, but Taylor played in like an archaic offense at Wisconsin, where like they don't throw the ball, they just get under center and run it. And he was phenomenal, and he was probably the best pure runner in the draft. And also a big, they mentioned this on the broadcast, which I thought was an interesting point. He actually ran more under center than he did with the Colts, which is sort of the opposite. Usually guys are all shotgun in college and then have to learn how to, run with the NFL game, under center. But the Wisconsin is a very old school offense, and the Colts, I think Philip Rivers, at this point in his career, he's more effective out of the shotgun. So they were saying on the broadcast, if you remember earlier in the season, he was kind of in the doghouse both with the fumbles, but with some unproductive games, and I think he had to work on his patience, which is something you have to do at the NFL level. Wait for the blocks to develop.
Yeah, so he definitely grew this year as a running back. Hopefully, he could take a big step next year when he makes his way through his career.
I definitely am rooting for the guy, because he had a great story, and the skill set is there, so he should be able to keep it up next year.
Should be able to. Let's move on to your favorite division. I know you love talking about them every week, and they always provide the NFC West.
I actually, that I'm a member of the LA Football Network group chat, because
you are. I know. I remember that, and they must have been excited when John Wolford, actually not excited, but prayers out to John Wolford. He did have to go to the hospital, but they won the game when no one thought they would. Apparently, I forgot last week, just because we were both so on the fence about it. You picked the Seahawks, I picked the Rams. I guess I was right in this situation here. I had no faith in them, but they seemed to come through with my game pick. The Seahawks couldn't do anything.
Well, yeah, and so I brought up the LA Football Network because you mentioned this being my favorite division sarcastically, and I actually,
Yeah.
as I tend to stir the pot, I got an argument with these guys because I said that the NFC West sucks, and as Rams and Chargers fans, they had serious beef with that. But I stand by it. I think we've talked about that division this year and the fact that there's really no front runner in it. But yeah, no, I think the Rams defense has really been the story this year. I mean, 2 years ago they go to the Super Bowl with a good defense, but a high flying offense and a smooth rhythmic passing game. And this year they've had to be a more physical team and rely more on the defense and on the running game, especially late in the season, especially as Jared Goff got hurt and
So he had surgery on his thumb, and John Wolford was supposed to step in, but again, prayers out to him. He did get into a bad injury, and now had to get rushed to the hospital.
and this was single handedly, this performance this year has seemed to single handedly turn Brandon Staley into a head coach, defensive coordinator for the Rams, as a head coaching candidate. So that's
Yeah, I saw he was starting to get some looks. But this Rams team has definitely become more defensive oriented, it seems like, especially when you have the number one defensive player, Aaron Donald, like manning that front five.
Now, what happened to Wolford? Because I missed the beginning of this game.
So Wolford, unfortunately, when he was running, I think his helmet just snapped his neck back when he was running, and he was on the floor for a while. Where I think he's now in back pains, and they had to get a stretcher for him, and he was rushed off during the middle of the game.
So it's interesting that then Goff came in because I thought the reason Wolford was starting was Goff couldn't play, but I guess Goff just
Goff was he was questionable to start. They said he can play, but he's not starting because they don't want to risk injury to his thumb. But due to the circumstance of Wolford's injury, he had to get thrusted in.
So he comes in and he clearly wasn't 100%, and it was really again talk about Cam Akers in this game has really come on in the second half this year, had 28 carries, but yeah, he didn't have to do that much, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about the health status of Wolford, but I feel like Wolford's still a guy. I mean, I feel like we have to pump the brakes on Wolford. I feel like if Goff is healthy, he has to start.
He's got to start, and honestly, I wouldn't thrust Wolford back in, especially after what happened. I'd probably, I'd just leave him on the roster and not put him in and try to find someone else.
I mean, he won an 18-7 game against the Kyler Murray-less Cardinals.
Yeah, I was gonna say he beat another backup.
All of a sudden he's the second coming of Kurt Warner. I mean, maybe Rams fans are just that.
No, the second coming of Kurt Warner is going to be the next guy we talk about in the next game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I know he does give you some wheels, but I think Goff's the best chance. But yeah, we know the formula: run the ball, play defense, and hope you're passing. Hope you don't have to win a shootout.
I was gonna say Cam Akers really won this game for them.
He did. I mean, and he's one. I talked about these rookie running backs that sort of needed half a year to kind of come on, and I think that's been the case for Cam Akers and for Zach Moss and for Jonathan Taylor. Cam Akers the Florida State guy. I was like, is there someone for Florida State? But that is Cam Akers. So for all three of those guys started the season drafted high, and I was like, what's going on? And then they adjust to the NFL game, and they're sharing carries, but now they all have the lion's share of the carries and are looking like they did in college. So a good win by the Rams, and I think at least this season, they've clearly shown that they have the Seahawks number. But I think the bigger story here is the Seahawks. I mean, they lose this game 30-20 at home, but it was really 30-13 until they get a garbage time score here. And we've been talking for weeks now about their performance offensively in the second half of the year and how much they fell off and how they just really have just been anemic on offense, even with Russell Wilson.
There was no production out of them in the second half of the season. Let Russ cook became let Russ simmer.
Yeah, and the assumption was an assumption I made, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams won, but the assumption I made was that it's the Seahawks. They've been doing this for years. They're not going to go to the Super Bowl, but they're good for a playoff win. They'll figure it out.
I honestly thought they could have made the championship game and lost.
They'll pull it out in the fourth quarter. It won't be pretty, but they'll get it done because of the veteran quarterback who's one of the best in the game. And that way of thinking ran out and showed that if you're playing the same way for a long time, you can't expect it to magically fix itself. And we know this team is as good as anyone in winning low-scoring games and winning one-score games. But their offense, I mean, it just looked it was really remarkable. It just looked like they were sleepwalking through this game. I mean, they were so just lethargic. They couldn't get anything going at all. I mean, for a playoff game at home, and I know it's with no fans, but it was really remarkable to see just how kind of dull they looked. And Russ had a pick six
Wide
on a
receiver
wide
screen.
receiver screen. You never see that. I mean, that's sort of epitomized what the Seahawks offense has become.
Well, they were so blatantly obvious with it too. Like the Rams seemed like they were ready for it, and then he just, I forgot the name of the corner who did it, but he just jumped and was like, "I'm gone." DK was not catching him.
Yeah, it wasn't even a tip ball or a hit. He just intercepted. He just literally intercepted the throwing pass.
Yeah, that was such a blatant screen. Like there was nothing they could have stopped.
And this is set forth a lot of arguments about Pete Carroll and about the philosophy of the running game. And analytics Twitter has been not a fan of Pete Carroll at all because he's so old school and because of his commitment to the run game and lack of willingness to put it in the hands of Russell Wilson. And he actually came out after this game and said that we need to run the ball more in the future and not. And then the next thing is what I think really threw analytics Twitter off, rightfully so. And he said, not so much, and he acknowledged it's going to piss some people off, not so much run it more effectively, but just have more carries, which is one of the biggest myths in the NFL, that you need more carries to set up anything offensively. So, I mean, that did reopen some old wounds, and you could argue about whether, I think there's some validity to those criticisms, but at the same time, this team has really, I don't think this particular game was about philosophy so much as it was about a team that just didn't look inspired and didn't look ready to play. And in the same way that the Packers under Mike McCarthy, it worked at first, but they needed a reboot with a new head coach. I don't know. I mean, do you think that it sort of feels? I'm not anti Pete Carroll, but it sort of feels like over the last few years, the Seahawks have sort of maxed out who they are. They have a couple really
he gets very
wins.
stale like later in the year. Like
right.
Russell Wilson, first half of the year, like front runner for the MVP,
He's always on fire. MVP,
but now we're not talking about him anymore. And it seems like the Seahawks are a first half season kind of team, and then the second half they start stumbling in.
So it just seems like it's gotten stale. And look, Pete Carroll's a player's coach. Guys love him.
Yeah.
But
some coaches could take to learn from that.
But when you have Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf on offense and Tyler Lockett, you expect more. And I think I struggle with the should they pass more, should they not? Because Russell Wilson, as great as he is, and he's getting his way into the all-time conversation at this point. He's not a conventional passer, and he takes a lot more sacks than conventional passers.
Yeah.
Especially on third down. So I think that is the reason they try to protect him a bit from the running game. But at the same time, these are veteran leaders that I think have earned the right to open the playbook. I don't know. It seems like they need an overhaul offensively. I mean, for years they relied on just Russell Wilson saving them, and they haven't put a priority on offensive line or really wide receiver until they drafted Metcalf. But even he was
a second round pick, so it wasn't even high priority at that point.
Right, so it's like you'd almost love to see Russell Wilson and with an offensive coordinator he really clicks with that can kind of, the same way you had Matt Ryan and Dirk Cutter that first year. I'd love to see someone.
The first go around.
Yeah, I would love to see someone that could really like be on the same page with him philosophically to open up the playbook, but also to help him with some of his flaws. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that they. Again, I don't think it's all on the coaching. I just know those questions are going to continue.
It's going to be an all-around thing. Like the defense also kind of disappeared there. Like
right.
Jamal Adams was supposed to be like a huge playmaker for them. He had 0 interceptions.
Right.
So
yeah, and it is. They got a lot of good. This coaching staff got so much good juju early on because of the Super Bowl win and because what they did to the greatest offense.
Those Broncos, yeah.
That was one of the best defenses we've ever seen in the history of the sport. So, they won a lot of, good juju with that and with what they were able to do in the playoffs with the Legion of Boom and with Russell Wilson. But those days are gone now, and they have to find.
It might be time to reevaluate everything there.
It's time to reevaluate everything. We haven't seen it yet.
No.
So. Disappointing, so especially considering how they started the season.
They started hot, so this is a sad way for the Seahawks to end their season.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next coming of Kurt Warner now. The Buccaneers beat the football team 31-23, but I don't care. We already knew that was going to happen. Let's talk about Taylor Heinicke. If you're watching on YouTube, I just got hella excited.
Well, I didn't even know Taylor Heineke was starting until I turned on this game. I mean,
Yeah,
I
no.
was
So I was watching the reports before the game was starting during the Seahawks Rams, and they were saying, yeah, Alex Smith is out due to leg.
due to leg.
Due to leg.
Yeah, uh, yeah. I mean, that came on. I turned on this game, and Tyler Heineke, jogged out for the first start, and I'm just thinking to myself, oh God, do I really have to watch a playoff game? And Tom Brady always seems to play backups in the. I mean, remember when he also got to play Brock Osweiler in the playoffs.
He played Brock
Um,
Osweiler, Nick Foles, Taylor
so he
Heineke.
lost to Nick Foles, yeah.
He lost to Nick
But
Foles.
yeah, I mean, so I was not expecting much, and they, I don't think they were amazing, and they were sitting on 7 points for a while, but the Washington defense did what we expected and kept them in the game,
Yeah, it was
and
100% like the defense helped them, but you still got to give credit to what Heineke was able to do
oh,
for this team.
absolutely.
Like he threw for what 300 more yards. He got them a nice sweet rushing touchdown. Like he laid himself on the line for a guy who was just called in while trying to take a engineering final.
I totally agree, and yeah, he played about as well as I think you'll ever see him play. 26 to 44, 306 touch and an interception. But like you said, that touchdown with his legs was really impressive, and what he was able to do, I think, extending the play also gave you a bit more than Alex Smith would have. Because you and I talked about how after that injury, Alex Smith's mobility was really limited.
His mobility was down. I mean, it was awesome to see Heineke. He's got some legs, and honestly, he kind of showed why he could be a quality backup for any of these teams looking.
I I agree, and they drew up a good game plan for him. They got receivers open, and he made the throws that were necessary. And ultimately, they had a chance to win this one. I mean, it was just 31-23, and they were going down the field late.
Yeah, they could
And
have.
as we've seen with Brady led teams, the opposition seems to get a questionable call every time. On a second down, Heineke completes a short pass that is ruled incomplete. I don't. Did you see this one?
Yes,
This
I
play?
watched the whole game. I know exactly
Yeah.
what you were talking about, and I thought it was
So
completed.
he catches it. He catches it, makes a few football moves, starts running, but then sort of he doesn't like bobble it heavily, but it sort of like
It moves a little
just
bit.
like
They said like the tip
it
of the
moves a
football
little
hit the
bit.
floor,
I
something
didn't
like
see
that.
anything hit the ground, but it moves a little bit in his hands, and as he's corralling it, he goes out of bounds. But it seemed like he had already caught the football and made a football move before that happened, and yet they go back and rule this incomplete. So that kind of changes the game. Again, they still have a chance, but now instead of third and 4 or third and 2, it's now
It was like
third
third
and
and 10
10.
still. Yeah.
Yes, and so Heineke takes a bad sack on that play. He has time, but he holds on to it, and that's just the result of inexperience, right? We see that with young
Well,
quarterbacks
it's
all the time.
absolutely. I feel like again like the NFL definitely wants the bigger market team right now, which is just Tom Brady. You
Yeah,
you want to
he
see
always
him move on again, so it's like
he always
there's the
gets the
call.
call. He always gets the call. So they take that sack on third and long, and then it becomes fourth and long, and
It just goes
you know
downhill from there.
it's Hail Mary, you just got to toss it up, and he does get it off, but it just doesn't happen. And for the Buccaneers offense, interesting. Fournette ran the ball pretty well. Tom Brady did throw on the plus side. He threw for 381 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks.
Yeah, he had a good
On the negative
day.
on the
Um,
negative side, he did have 18 incompletions.
yeah, I was gonna say
So
Chris
it was
Godwin had a lot of drops during the game.
there were a lot of uncharacteristic drops as well. I will give him that. Mike Tirico did this game with Tony Dungy, and Tirico's a professional. I get why people like him. I've never been the biggest fan, but they were just jacking off Tom Brady the whole game. I don't know about you, but
They
the
of
goat, the
course.
goat, the goat, the goat. It's I'm so sick of it. It's like we get it. He's won a
No
lot of
matter
playoffs.
what, you're always going to hear that. And with next week's game, where they're going to be playing again, it's going to be GOAT versus second GOAT. You're going to be hearing them like toot everyone's horn like crazy.
It's just exhausting. I mean, Tom Brady he's won a lot of playoff games. He's also won a lot of playoff games where he didn't play particularly well and the team bailed him out. So
He had a
obviously
lot of
it's a big
defensive help
argument.
on that one
Oh, a ton. So obviously that's a bigger discussion, but that we won't totally go into now. But for just
later.
announcers to just embrace this, that like, oh, it's the goat, and he's so, especially
He's
there was
greatest. We got it. Buccaneers are going to move on. And
and it's not they won a one score game against Taylor Heineke. Like, it's not as much as well as Heineke played. It's not like that. It was
it's not
seven
like
to
he won a
nineteen.
one
It's not
score
like
game against Rodgers or Breeze. He won against a quarantine quarterback, is what they called him.
And yeah, and the first, I think it was the first touchdown pass he threw, maybe the second was a wide open. It was a cover. It was the hole in cover two, and it was wide open down the sideline.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
Dungy was like, well, everyone's saying Brady can't throw deep, but look at that deep throw. Okay, A, it was wide open. B, that was not a deep throw. That was like a 15-yard throw. So
No, they're gonna toot his horn. They're gonna make everything he sounds so great, and that's this game was like it was a great game to watch, but the announcing was getting really annoying. Where I ended up just muting the game and just talking to my friends that came over.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a good move, but this offense does, outside of that, this offense does, at least in this game, and it's again, I'm not going to judge them until we see a better opponent, but it does look like they're finding the rhythm. They did a lot of play action, deep shots, so a lot of play action, and then
Yeah, they were
balls
taking
down
a
the
lot of deep
seam
shots
and
there.
up the post, off of play action, and then I said earlier this year, Brady. Most of Brady's play action stuff in New England was those quick, slants. Arians likes to do more of the deep stuff, and we'll see if it works, moving forward. The one thing I will say about Brady is, he does still have the arm to make those throws. For whatever reason, and I have a lot of critiques with his career. He has managed to avoid the arm strength decline in the way we've seen it from Breeze and Peyton and Favre and Rivers
Roethlisberger
and
now.
pretty much every other old QB, Roethlisberger. So I don't know if it's because of his weird diet and he goes to bed at 7 p.m. I know he has the whole Tom Brady health method that's like that doctors say is total pseudoscience, but maybe it works for him because his arm still looks good. So
He's
they
looking
move on,
solid.
and
So whatever
yeah,
steroids he's
we'll
on
see.
is working.
Right,
Whatever steroids.
exactly.
All right, why don't we move on to the Sunday games because I'm tired of tooting his horn. The
Me too.
Ravens beat the Titans 20-13. They really were able to hold Derrick Henry down, that Ravens team, and I think they figured it out.
Yeah, and that's the problem with a team and I say this is I'm not picking on the Titans. I say this every year about
Teams
teams
that are
that rely
one-dimensional.
right teams that rely on the running game is that any given week an opponent can shut down the running game, and if that happens, you're screwed. That's what happened this game. But this was I think pretty as about as bad an offensive output as we've
It
seen
was
from
bad both
teams
sides because
all
we
year.
said this earlier in the year too. The Titans and the Ravens are literally the same team, except
Oh, they're
for
mirror images. Yeah,
yeah, the Ravens just have the quarterback that can move, while the Titans actually have a running back, and that's the
yeah.
problem with these teams. Like honestly, this was a good matchup for these two teams. Like it makes them rivals. Like they were dancing on the logo because the Titans did that to them early in the year, but now when the Ravens next week, whoever plays them, they're very one-dimensional. They're going to get caught.
Well, I agree. I think that there's a lot of look. There was obviously a lot of emotion on the side of the Ravens, both from finally getting a win over the Titans and also from Lamar getting the first playoff win,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
you also saw that narrative start to accumulate that he can't get it done in the playoffs. And I give them credit, but at the same time, this was a 20-13 game. That's usually
With
not going to
the
do it.
sloppiest of offenses.
Yeah, that's not usually going to do it for them. So I don't. I'm hesitant to give them too much credit in this one. Now, the one play that changed. Now, Justin Tucker did miss from 52, which is
Yep.
unusual for him. Usually, I'd say that's long, but for Tucker, it's
For
not.
Tucker, it's automatic usually.
Actually, a lot of kickers. Will Lutz had a bad week too. Blankenship missed. A lot of kickers had bad
We'll
weeks
talk
this week.
about Will
But
Lutz in a second because we got some.
yeah,
We'll
for
talk
sure.
about that.
But yeah, so Jackson throws a bad pick early. It floats on him, totally inaccurate, and it's looking like the same old story. And then in the second quarter, he has that huge run that busted it open. What was it, a 75 yard run?
Yeah, oh yeah, Lamar
That's
Jackson's run that was huge.
and that's what he gives you. I mean, I don't. There's no one else in the NFL that can do that with the speed he has, other than Kyler Murray. I actually think Kyler Murray's a little faster, but other than Kyler Murray, he's unique in that ability. And he had 136 yards on the day. So that was a difference maker in this game. And the Titans, like you said, 18 carries for 40 yards for Henry. And I was reading an interesting stat that all the 500-yard rushers from the regular season, or 500. What am I saying? 2,000-yard rushers from the regular season. They're 0-5 in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, honestly, again, your whole offense is a running game. You're gonna get caught.
Right. Outside of, I think Terrell Davis with Denver was the one exception, and that was a different era in the NFL. So they struggle. Tannehill didn't have a great day, just 165 yards. They were unable to get outside of that one touchdown, as we've seen at times this year. They were unable to get AJ Brown and Corey Davis.
I know Corey
involved.
Davis seemed like he got hurt during the last quarter because I saw him was on the sideline more often.
It's just weird. They're talented on they have two talented receivers, and at times the production hasn't been there. They had a chance to go down the field late in this game, but Khalif Raymond slipped. Tannehill threw a pick, and Titans have been very good at fourth quarter comebacks this year. I think they've had 4 or 5, unable to do it in this game.
Yeah, honestly, we'll just have to wait to see what happens now. It's gonna be an interesting offseason for the Titans, and it's gonna be a rough game for the Ravens next week, which we'll get into later.
And Mike Vrabel gets some criticism as well for punting on 4th and 2.
Yeah, I didn't get that one, to be honest with you.
There were a lot of cowardly punts this weekend, including in the Ohio State game last night. Coaches, I guess, get scared when they play good opponents, which is the time you have to have, be gutsy. So, but disappointing because, the Titans, we've seen them look phenomenal on offense. I mean, we've seen them put 40 burgers up multiple times this year, and then they'll go another week and you kind of scratch your head. So, you wonder what the path is for them long term, because Tannehill, he's kind of a system quarterback, and I don't think there's anyone that can run the system better when it's working. Like when they can run the ball, he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. But when they're not, the passing game just doesn't really work.
He's not really the guy you want to rely on in those situations. It really seems like for him.
Yeah, so
you need to have Derrick Henry ready for you.
But it's disappointing. Everyone wants to see the Titans do well, but they have to be better throwing the football. And I don't know how much long term. I don't think you can replace Tannehill unless you have a good rookie quarterback, which they're not going to have.
No, Tannehill's going to be sticking around for a bit, so we'll have to see what happens with him next
year. They'll probably roll forward with it, but this is now 2 years for them. They've kind of had a couple goose eggs in the playoffs with this formula, and like you said, good win for the Ravens, but it's going to get harder from here going forward.
It absolutely will be.
They're still not. Lamar Jackson, 17 to 24, 179, no touchdowns and a pick. They're still, and I don't buy that this Ravens team is better than the team last year. The Ravens team last year was a phenomenal team, and
people were scared to see that team last year.
They were a phenomenal team, and they let their guard down in the playoffs and had a sloppy day because they were overconfident. But they were I don't think, again, it's the same thing as the Titans. We'd be having the same conversation about the Ravens that we're having about the Titans if they lost this game. So
yeah. All right, let's talk about the NFC game, the last one. But before we even talk about the game, I need to talk about the network it was on. I don't know about you. I watched it on Nickelodeon the whole way through. I loved it. I loved the whole thing.
I did too.
The slime cannon in the end zone was great. I thought the commentators did the best job that they could. They did pick someone who clearly shouldn't have been there, but she still kind of gave a great effort in what she was trying to do. Nate Burleson was always amazing as well. I forgot the main guy who was commentating, but he kept getting everyone involved.
Yeah.
And I think the Nick MVP trophy went to the right person.
It was phenomenal. I mean, it was. I agree. I was skeptical about it moving in, and
easily.
But it was so much fun. They had fun graphics on the field. They had cut-ins with SpongeBob, and
they were having such a great time. Halftime, they did show the preview for Steven Hillenberg's Worst Nightmare.
Oh, it looked terrible. It looked so bad.
Absolutely.
Sean Payton got slimed after the game.
He did. He made a promise during the game that if they won, he'd get slimed. Yeah.
But you're right. It was Nate Burleson, who's played in the NFL for years, so he knows the game. But he actually spoke to it. He talked about it in a way that kids could understand.
I thought he did a great job.
And then you had 2 kid commentators who didn't know about football, but were good personalities, I thought. I mean,
the girl who sat in the booth was good, and the kid who was doing the sideline reporting, they did great.
Oh, he was the kid on the field was great. I mean, that guy was the Energizer Bunny. And then
he was having so much fun.
Noah Eagle,
that's who it was.
Play-by-play is he's Ian Eagle's son. Want to hear something amazing? Noah Eagle is 24 years old.
Neat.
Doesn't his voice sound like his dad's, who's like 45?
He sounded much older than 24, but I thought he did a great job calling the game. I thought that was great.
He has, if you know Ian Eagle, he has it's uncanny how some of it. But it was a great production. I think it was a great way to expand the demographic. I mean, if you have a family and your
Want to
kids,
watch the game? There's only one issue they had during the game.
Yeah, what's that?
Cordero Patterson screamed the
Oh, yeah,
F-bomb.
the F-bomb.
He screamed it.
It was a funny F-bomb, too. It was the ref made a call, and he was just like, the fuck?
He's like, the fuck? And it was pretty fucking, it was loud.
It wasn't an angry F-bomb. It was a confused F-bomb.
Yeah, but still, Nickelodeon let an F-bomb get through. That's too funny.
People were saying they should have put the SpongeBob sailor
Dolphin,
mouth,
the dolphin one in there. But, they must have missed it. They're on a 5-minute tape delay, too, for that reason.
I know. So that was the one blip, but I'm all with you, Sam. I watched the whole thing on. Part of the reason I watched it too on Nickelodeon was A, I'm kind of tired of Tony Romo, and B, it's the Bears. I knew this wasn't going to be a good game, so I wanted.
Yeah, it was the Bears, so I was fine with doing that. But I like Tony Romo, but I thought these guys did great. I thought it was awesome. They did cut to Tony Romo for a little bit. I noticed during the game they were waving at Jim Nantz.
I missed that, but I was a bit in and out. But
Nate Burleson looked up. He goes, "Hey, Jim."
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did it on broadcast.
And I think what was great about this broadcast too is that yes, show the ability to expand to different audiences, do and try a new thing, but also it just it didn't take the game too seriously. Like it was, football is, and there was a good Sports Illustrated article about this. Football has become so serious and so argumentative, and this was just like kids watching the game. Like, oh, that was so cool, that was such a cool move, and the Bears sucked. Everyone knew the Bears sucked, but they kept it positive. And
I thought it was great. Mitch Trubisky even won an award finally.
He won the Nickelodeon
MVP
award,
Nickelodeon
the MVP.
Most Valuable, yeah.
And they questioned it a little. It was online voting, and clearly
it was a kid's vote. Who cares? The guy had a funny name.
Right, and they questioned it, but they said, you know what? He hung in there. He fought. So if you're looking for context in terms of football and story and how the game's going and how it fits into the season, it didn't have that, but it was fun and it was entertaining, and I would love to see more of it in the future.
The one thing I love too, they cut to SpongeBob in the Krusty Krab with a bunch of fish watching the game.
Yeah, they had all these really fun interlays, and Sam, that MVP award, that is now on Mitchell Trubisky has now made NFL history because that award is now listed on his Pro Football Reference page.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's they listed it in that orange Nickelodeon shade, so I find that great. So yeah, he has now made history.
What's funny too is I saw a meme where it's like, all right, Patrick Mahomes won a Super Bowl, Deshaun Watson won the college football playoff, and Mitch Trubisky won the Nickelodeon one.
MVP, right. And they also did a couple of fun filters on there was one on Drew Brees where they gave him like giant eyes and a hamburger head.
They kept giving him like Sandy's bubble head too.
And Sandy's bubble was with the bow. They had a lot of cool. So it was a really fun game, especially for us '90s kids.
I think they had a great time with it.
Yeah. So and it was
to
a
the
great
actual
spot for
game.
I was just gonna say it was a great spot for it too because obviously we wouldn't want that for a Super Bowl, but for the first weekend of the 7th seed in the wild card, which is not we knew the Saints were going to win, so why not have some fun with it? I thought it was great.
Absolutely. So real quick, you were mentioning Will Lutz's kicking issues he was having during the game. If you didn't notice, they put SpongeBob between the goalpost. I don't think he wanted to hit him in the face. That's why he kept missing.
Yeah. Well, it worked. Yeah, on the Nickelodeon broadcast, they put SpongeBob's face in the goalpost, and it didn't work. Yeah, well, they just signed Blair Walsh, and I hope he doesn't play because he's not a good kicker.
He really lost his after that Seahawks-Vikings kicking game that he had.
His rookie year was phenomenal, and then
he fell off a bridge.
He got progressively worse.
Now,
yes. So in this game, it was kind of a sloppy game. I mean, the Saints, they looked good on their first drive, and I thought they were going to run away from it, but they didn't really turn it on until late in the game, and the Bears had Javon Wims, who is still on the team and actually looks like their number one receiver. He had a huge drop on a trick play in the end zone.
Yeah,
that was really it for the Bears offense. Like after that, they just didn't do anything.
No, they really sloppy. They were sloppy. I think the funnier thing too was when they were showing the replay on Nickelodeon, they had little block characters reacting, like recreating the whole play, and just watching his little block character looking down on it because he dropped it was, I think, the funniest thing to me. But he dropped an easy one.
He did, and the Saints, a lot of dip and dunk, a lot of it was a sloppy performance, but at the same time, the Bears have always played them well. I would expect them to play better against the Tampa defense than against the Bears defense. But, they weren't super sharp, and I got it. We've talked about Taysom Hill before, but Sean Payton put Taysom Hill in to throw a deep pass, and he had a fumble. He
had a fumble interception because he got that thing swatted out of his hand, and a big man
swatted out of his hand, and doesn't it just feel like Sean Payton gonna do something. I just can't stand it. I feel like he's gonna put Taysom Hill in next week, and it's gonna cost him the game. He's gonna put it in at a stupid point, and that gave the Bears a short field. So
Unfortunately, the Saints are always cursed in the playoffs, so it's honestly just when is it going to come?
yeah. But not a ton to say about this one. Again, sloppy
It was
win,
a game, and we were more interested that it was on Nickelodeon than we were about
Nickelodeon.
the actual football.
That was the real story.
That's the thing is, I loved it was on Nickelodeon. If it was a better game, then I'd have more to say. But like, it really wasn't. We hit on all the notes. Like, they got Michael Thomas back. That was probably the only thing we missed.
And the Bears, I guess now we'll see what they do this offseason.
Matt Nagy's going to stick around. Trubisky's going to stick around.
How can Trubisky stick around?
He's going to stick around. They got him to the playoffs. That's the problem.
That would be ridiculous.
Last game. This one's probably a little more interesting to talk about. AFC North battle. The Browns with backup coach destroyed the Steelers.
Where do we even start for this game? I mean, so first in context, the Browns are in the playoffs for the first time since, do we know when?
2002.
2002, okay.
Let's talk about how the first time they're back in the playoffs, their coach gets COVID. Their starting lineman, Joel Bitonio, COVID. One other player that was like one of their starters, I forgot his name, COVID. Two of the staff specialists, COVID. So you're sitting there with the specials team coach, I believe, is who stepped up to the plate. And to get the performance out of the guys like that he got, that's outstanding by him.
I mean, yeah, there was so much going against the Browns coming into this game. We like Mike Prefer, but your special teams coach is acting as your interim head coach, your coach is also the one who calls the plays. So, first playoff appearance since 2002, you got to think there are jitters, and plus they're playing the Steelers at home, who on the road they played the Steelers the week before without their starting quarterback, and they looked,
they almost beat them last week. But this week we come in, and you know what, Juju, I feel like Juju is gonna cause this team so many curses if he keeps doing what he's doing. Because he danced on the logos, lost. He started being a complete dickhead, like, oh, they're just the Browns, we'll beat these guys. And look what fucking happened. The Browns fucking trounced them.
Then did you see what Chase Claypool said after the game?
No, I actually didn't.
He said on the internet, I don't know, TikTok, some feed, he said, yeah, bad loss, but the Browns are going to get destroyed next week, so it doesn't matter. It's like, how can you talk trash after that loss?
All right.
Like,
what did they have, like five turnovers that game?
That to me says there's an attitude problem in the locker room. But
they're basically bringing back Antonio Brown.
I totally agree with you. But in terms of this game, this was maybe the worst first quarter of football in a playoff game you've ever seen. It rivals a little bit that first quarter New England had when they played the Ravens in 2009 when Ray Rice took it to the end zone on the first play, and then Terrell Suggs stripped Brady on the next play, and then Brady threw an interception on the next play. I mean, the Browns went up 28-0. First play of the game, Maurkice Pouncey, your 10-plus year veteran, snaps the ball way over Ben's head, close to about the 1 yard line. They're sprinting back to get it, and James Conner tries to pick it up and can't pick it up, and instead of kicking out of the end zone, it's a touchdown. Okay. Next possession, Ben Roethlisberger's under pressure. He panics. He throws it to a lineman, or I don't know if it was like someone. He was trying to hit a short. He was trying to dump it off, and it was a panic throw, and they return it. Then Jarvis Landry is wide open, Yak for the touchdown, and then possession after that. I think it was Nick Chubb, takes a bunch of Steelers defenders into the end zone, and just like that, it's 28-0. And this game reminded me of what an overrated coach Mike Tomlin is, because I've given him some credit in recent years for winning 8 games without Ben Roethlisberger, for keeping the team together when we know how crazy Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown were. But how many times is this team going to go into the playoffs, underwhelm, and get 0 sacks and 0 turnovers against? I mean, they did this with the same thing happened with Blake Bortles 2 years ago. I mean, there was actually a good list of how many games the Steelers have had slow starts in the playoffs and have just totally choked on defense. And this was probably the worst of them because of how good their defense was this year, and they did nothing in this game. But 2004, the Patriots beat them 41-27. Patriots go out to a huge lead. 2007, Jacksonville with David Garrard goes out to a huge lead. 2010, the Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers goes out to a 21-3 lead. 2017 versus Jacksonville, Blake Bortles goes out to a 21-0 lead, 14-0 lead, and then 28-0 against the Cleveland Browns in this one, It's just the same. Talk about
The
the same
problem
old
with the
ground.
Steelers is they don't look at their current opponent. They look for the next one, but they never finish this one.
Yeah, and again, it shows why I think Mike
Like
Tomlin.
the one against Jacksonville, you said they're like, "Oh, we're ready for New England," and then fucking get
Right.
smoked.
But they haven't been ready for New England either. I mean, they played some of the worst defense against Tom Brady and the Patriots than any team in the entire NFL in the last 2
Oh,
decades.
absolutely.
So,
But this
Mike
team is
Tomlin,
always looking ahead. They never look at what's in front of them.
but it's just a lack of preparation. I mean, Mike Tomlin, we've talked about how he plays down in the competition. He won a Super Bowl with Bill Cowher's players earlier in his career, and he has underwhelmed. How could I forget? This team lost to Tim Tebow. This team gave up 300 yards on 10 attempts to Tim freaking Tebow. I mean, I love Tebow mania, but so it's just, again, if you're still, I mean, everyone wants to talk about Ben Roethlisberger and his 4 interceptions. I'll get to that in a second, but this falls squarely on the defense and on Mike Tomlin and on a historic, and we've seen defenses collapse in the playoffs, but we haven't seen them go from number 1 to looking like, or top 5 to looking like worst in the league. And this was just a lack of preparation. Now, the Steelers did try to mount a comeback, but every time they did, the Browns answered. I mean, they cut it to 28-7, and the Browns get it back with a minute and a half, 2 minutes left in the game, and they have a touchdown drive to make it 35-7. Steelers get a field goal before the half. Baker Mayfield converts a few third downs. I think one of them was with his legs. And then late in the game, they get some momentum going here. They cut it. They get a three straight, I think, 3 and outs, and it looks like they have momentum back. It's actually as good as the Steelers' offense has looked in a while. They cut it to 35-23, and again, Mike Tomlin made one of the worst calls I've ever seen. He punted on 4th and 1 with about 8 minutes left in the third quarter, I believe, on the 40-yard line, and he just. What happened? Okay. Well, first of all, he tried to fake a fake punt, and no one bought it. He tried to draw them offside, took the delay of game, and your offense just scored like 3 straight times. So you have all the momentum, and when you're down 28-0, and then you finally mount a comeback, you can't let the other team have more momentum. It made me physically angry because I'm not a Steelers fan, but that was just a horrendous call, and they deserve to lose after that. So he punts it. What happens? Goes into the end zone, touchback. And Steelers or Browns go up. Browns go up. I forget what the score. Well, 42-28, I think, or no, 42-23, and then I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure they score a touchdown, and then the Steelers score again, but the Browns have a field goal drive that lasts like 8 minutes, and then it's 45-29 with 3 minutes left in the game, and that was really Ben's worst interception of the game. He throws what is essentially a pick six right to a defender. But it's a 16-point game, so it's technically a 2-score game, but you're not going to get 2 2-point conversions. So it's really a 3-score game, and it's desperation time. Yeah, it was a bad throw. But Ben Roethlisberger had a pretty incredible day. I mean, this was sort of a microcosm of Jameis Winston's seasons last year. He was 47 of 68 for 501 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. He set a record for most completions in the game all time, breaking Tom Brady's record of 45 in the Falcons Super Bowl comeback. And the most passing attempts of all time is 70, so he was 2 away from that. He now, I believe, has a record for most 500-yard games, and is, I believe, 3-2 in those games. Let's talk about the 4 interceptions. The first one was a panic throw. The second one was a tipped ball. It may have somewhat been his fault, but may not have been. No, I'm sorry. The third one was a tipped ball. The second one was off the hands of Deontay Johnson. That wasn't his fault. Third one was a tipped ball, and then the fourth one, 3 minutes left, is a bad throw. Okay. He needs to play better, and he's been turning the football over too much in these games. But again, for everyone who's saying Big Ben's washed, he can't throw the football. Now, I don't know. He did look washed at times this year in the Bills game. And there is some similarity to 2014 Peyton Manning, where he started off well and finished not so great, and then next year he was terrible. So I don't know if he'll retire or not, but I'm sorry, you don't go 47 of 68 for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns if you can't throw the football anymore. So he was part of the problem, but I can't blame the entirety of this game on him. And yeah, the stats are bad, but I just think this was a total choke job by the Pittsburgh Steelers, by their defense, and by Mike Tomlin. And again, I cannot overemphasize how that punt was one of the worst calls you were ever seeing. Not to mention the fact that he also, and I missed this because I didn't see it, he also punted on the opponent's side of the field down 28-0 early in the game. So Mike Tomlin's going to get a pass because people think he's a good coach, but he's continued to screw over his Hall of Fame quarterback. And look, I don't like Ben Roethlisberger. I know he's got off the field problems. I don't think he's a good dude, and I don't like the Steelers, but I'll defend him because he's always underrated and gets the brunt of the blame. When all this season he's been the reason they've been competing, and it's the same in this game. And when he's partially to blame, but you have 3 or 4 other things to blame, then the brunt of the blame shouldn't go to him. And in this game, this was just a Steelers team that was flawed all season, but this was just all about attitude and coaching, and they embarrassed themselves. And I guess I should talk about the Browns, and congratulations to them. Baker Mayfield had 3 touchdowns, no picks. Nick Chubb ran hard. Jarvis Landry had a good day. And I think the core of the game when Baker Mayfield, like you said, his offensive lineman was off, and he said, some guy earlier in the game came up to me, and I introduced myself to some guy named Blake in the locker room, and he played great tonight. I don't even know. I still don't know his last name, but they were able to rally without their head coach, get a playoff win. But they got a tough test ahead of them. I give them all the credit in the world. I love seeing the Browns succeed, but this was all about another choke and an embarrassment by Mike Tomlin with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, this game was just horrible. You mentioned everything. I think you hit everything right on the head for me. The defense came out to play for the Browns, and the Steelers did not decide to come and show up and play. They looked like they were playing the football team again the way they were playing.
It was just...
It was terrible. It was just terrible.
And we've seen the same pattern every time. So Mike Tomlin's not a good coach. I'll say I think
he's definitely losing his touch again.
They've underachieved this decade so much. Just go look at and look, Ben Roethlisberger, he's not at the level of Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or any of those guys, but he's a top 20 all-time quarterback, and they should be. Yes, he's had costly turnovers in the playoffs, but time and time again to have these defensive meltdowns, to lose 2 years ago to Blake Bortles and do the exact same thing, shame. So and then another tidbit with Ben Roethlisberger out, Baker Mayfield is now the oldest quarterback left in the AFC playoff race. Isn't that incredible?
That's crazy.
I've talked all year about the changing of the guard and the young guys. I mean, it's here. I mean, that shows you, because Baker Mayfield,
the oldest guy in the AFC right now in the playoffs.
Baker Mayfield was drafted in
2017.
So that's not that long ago. I mean, he's a third-year player. Its youth has taken over, and it's cool. It's cool to see. And they got a tough test next week.
Yeah. So why don't we get into next week real quick? So we have the Rams going to Lambeau to take on the Packers. Do you think they're going to have the same luck that they did last week against Seattle?
Yeah, this is probably the least interesting game to me.
I think the Packers are going to take it. So
I could see either one. So Packers favored at 7. I could see. I don't know what's going to happen. I could see the Packers destroying them. I could see the Packers having a tight win, and I could see the Rams winning too. I think I would bet on the Packers having a tight win probably.
Yeah, they're probably going to win it.
That's probably what I think is going to happen, and I think it's probably going to be kind of a boring game.
Yeah. All right. So the Ravens are heading over to Buffalo to take on the Bills. What are you thinking for that one?
I'm thinking the Ravens defense is really good and is going to pose a serious challenge to Josh Allen, and the Bills know how to play in the cold, or the Ravens know how to play in the cold, and they know how to be physical running the football, but they have an unequivocal quarterback advantage in Josh Allen. I mean, this is the biggest test of his career by far, and it's very possible that he's not.
This is going to be a huge test for Josh Allen, but I think he's more well-equipped than Lamar. Yes, Lamar's great, but I think Josh Allen has better receivers around him where he could throw the ball a lot better.
I agree. I think Josh Allen was probably 3 or 4 at MVP, where Lamar Jackson struggles to throw for 200 yards. So, if they can keep the score down, they have a chance. But this Bills offense, they've been tested and they seem to come through. So this will be their biggest test, and it'll be an important game. But I think you have to bank on the better passer in this game. And the gap between these two is pretty large when it comes to throwing the football.
Yeah. So hopefully I think the Bills are going to win. I kind of want to see them win. I like the Bills Mafia.
Yeah, and he's just very hard. You have to get pressure on him because he's just very hard to defend when he's extending the play.
He really is. We got the Browns going to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to take this one. There's way too much for the Browns to handle, I think, at this point with them now, because the Chiefs are a more well-disciplined team, but the only issue is we've seen it all throughout the year. They can't play normal football games, so if they start doing some wacky shit, that might get out of hand.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs could be a little rusty because remember they've now sat out for 2 weeks.
Mahomes, Kelsey and all them, they were out, but
Right.
I think
So
they're
they
still
could,
going to be dangerous.
yeah, they could be a little rusty to start. But I would still take them. I don't think the Browns defense poses enough challenges for them. I think they should be able
I think
to
they're just
handle
way
it.
too quick.
And if they were any other team that didn't have the history of that weren't the defending Super Bowl champion and didn't have Patrick Mahomes and didn't have Andy Reid at coach and played the way they did this year, I'd be fair to question them. But I think you have to give those guys the benefit of the doubt to get it done because that's what they do.
And then to round out our last game of the week, we have the Bucks heading to New Orleans to take on the Saints one more
Well,
time.
it's the third match of the year for Tom Brady and Drew Brees. Could be the last time these two see each other. The Saints won the first two.
I think the Saints are going to win all three. Clean
yeah,
sweep.
So yeah, I mean, again, the Saints seem to just have the worst luck in the playoffs.
They do. I think their luck is going to come next week in the conference champions. I think Drew Brees and the Saints have a lot better advantage against the Bucks.
Yeah, I would agree. I do. Again, I'm hoping something. They don't get the bad luck bug doesn't bite too soon here, so we don't have to hear another week about how Tom Brady's the GOAT. But this is a great quarterback matchup. I mean, this is history again. Brees could be done after this year, so enjoy this while it's on.
Yeah, this should hopefully be a fun one.
But I agree. I take the Saints now. No crowd. Was there any crowd there at the Superdome?
There was a small crowd, not a big one.
Okay.
There was a bigger crowd in Buffalo.
Yeah, not influential enough to really, impact this one. But yeah, it was a Saints home crowd. I think full Saints home crowd would destroy.
I think it's going to be a half.
But I think this evens the playing field a bit. But if the Saints don't shoot themselves in the foot, I would.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to do they shoot themselves. So.
Right, because the defense has been better this year. So they, Drew has to be sharp. They can't be sloppy. Don't put in Taysom Hill and do dumb stuff. Get some explosive plays and play defense. But fingers crossed. I'm taking the Saints as well.
Yep. Before we wrap up, Cary, we have 3 headlines I'd like to get to real quick.
Yeah,
that I think will be some fun to talk about. After the Philadelphia Eagles and on Sunday Night Football tried to take Nate Sudfeld and try to make a legitimate reason why he started, Doug Peterson is now fired as Eagles head coach.
Yeah, I was honestly shocked by this, and this is not to defend Doug Peterson because I've ripped him all year, and he has been horrible this year. But I don't know. It's 1 year for a guy that is 3 years removed from winning a Super Bowl.
He's won the division most of the years too. He's been there,
right?
But here's the thing, though: like he destroyed the locker room.
And for your only Super Bowl winning head coach in franchise history, I believe, right? I mean,
yeah, that's their only Super Bowl.
He did. I don't agree with that move, but I'm a little surprised they made this move. And it seems to me that this organization is really just because first of all, I don't know who in their right mind would want to coach there and take over the mess they're having at quarterback, number one, and take on that Carson Wentz contract. Who would you coach there? Hell no. So that's number one. Number two, there's been this line thrown around that they chose Wentz over Peterson because we know Wentz was mad at Peterson. Again, I think I don't get that by Wentz because if I was Peterson, I would have benched Wentz 5 games earlier. So there's that. But I think the biggest story here is just that this has become a very dysfunctional organization in terms of who's in charge. Because the rumors are there were a lot of conflicting voices going on here, and they bring Howie Roseman back to his GM role after Chip Kelly leaves, and Doug Peterson tries to hold on to a lot of the veterans, but they lose. I think it was Ian Rappaport who reported that he was quote Peterson was quote being tired of being told what to do, which sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but the additional reports by Adam Schefter indicate that there was friction among the staff there, but because and it's not the same staff that he won the Super Bowl with, because you have to remember Frank Reich left and John DiFilippo left, and those were both really important members of coordinating this passing game and of coordinating the development of Carson Wentz. My understanding is between the general manager, the owner, you had other people in this organization that were trying to kind of, had conflicting visions about how Peterson wanted to coach, and he wanted more control than he was getting. And then you look at Jeffrey Lurie, who I hate the Eagles. I actually like Jeffrey Lurie. He's one of the few not rich right-wing assholes who are owners. Him and Arthur Blank are the two kind of liberal owners that I like. So shout out to Arthur Blank. But yeah, I mean, he came out and said, I think the most confusing quote uh, was Peterson didn't deserve to be fired, but that's not how this business works. And it's like, well, hold on, aren't you the one who just fired him? Like, so how does that work? So he was trying to break a line of being very complimentary, but we're looking to the future. I think it's both true to say that Doug Peterson was an asshole and a bad coach this year, and that this move is a bit confusing. And I think it's fair just because of the way this ownership structure is looking, and because of their contract, situation, it could be bad for them in the future. Now, who knows? We talked about how they're probably going to have to change regimes anyway, so maybe they get it done sooner and they get a great head coach.
Yeah, they're going to have to start changing over.
But the way they've handled things this year, and the way it does sound like there's some conflicts of personality, I would be skeptical of that happening for the Eagles team.
Yeah, you know what? Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was
just going to say, does one of your next breaking news items have to do with the team that's looking at Doug Peterson?
No. But speaking of Doug Peterson, though, I mean, like, he destroyed this locker room. He ruined the confidence of your quarterback. But onto the point where it's like, oh, we picked Wentz over Peterson. Yeah, you're paying him the money, but I feel like Wentz doesn't have the power, like, with J.J. Watt when he's in, like, Houston. Like, he has proven himself, so when he doesn't like someone, get the guy out. When it comes to Wentz, he hasn't really proven himself. He didn't win a Super Bowl. He didn't win the MVP. He's not really carrying this team anymore.
No, I agree. There's a percent. I think Lurie said Wentz has been elite for 4 years, and their fifth year drop. We've seen that from a lot of quarterbacks. Those two statements are factually incorrect. I mean,
he hasn't been great since their Super Bowl run, which he wasn't even part of anymore.
Right, and so I don't agree with that. I think the thing, the J.J. Watt comparison. I think the thing is, like, usually even if the quarterback isn't very good, teams are very hesitant about pissing off their quarterback. And I think like, for example, Eli Manning, before he was a Super Bowl winner, Tiki Barber went to the media and started trash talking Eli Manning, and they chose Eli over Tiki. Tiki was your franchise running back, but you can't.
I was gonna say, I'd choose a quarterback over a running back most days.
The reason, but at the same time, and again, we can debate whether this is a good move, but I think the big reason that Gettleman shipped off, and we'll talk about him, but the big reason that Gettleman shipped off Odell Beckham was because he didn't want a young quarterback to be swayed by a diva receiver who complains when he doesn't get the ball. So I think we see it a lot in terms of franchise signing. Again, I don't think that's the main reason, but if that was part of it, could work. So again, in a vacuum, yes, Doug Peterson was not coaching well, but because of what he's done in the past and because of the questions about the organization that remain, I'm skeptical that they'll get a better coach moving forward. And the next report after this happened was that the Jets are now looking at Doug Peterson, which just seems very, very appropriate, doesn't it?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. If the Jets pick him up, that'd be very interesting. What news did you have to report before I move on with what I have?
That was it. The Jets.
The Jets are looking into him. It's just weird all around, but we'll see what happens.
I can talk about how I'm furious at the Giants for retaining Dave Gettleman. Do you want me to talk about that?
No, I got some more news before we move on that. If you want to really talk about that, we'll talk about that later. Another NFC East move, though, that was made. Dan Quinn got hired to be the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. The Cowboys are trying to choke.
You can't, this is another thing I was just arguing with LA Football Network about, and I actually will bring some of those comments here. You can't make this stuff up. So I mean, this is just, you have a team that for the last, I'd say, 3 years has been historically, at least in franchise history, and this year in NFL history, historically bad on defense. And your biggest problem was your defense. And the Falcons just fired a head coach who
was supposed to be a defensive-minded
guy. And their defense was horrible. And now the Cowboys hire Dan Quinn right away. So this is just another.
Jerry look at the Falcons and be like, yeah, we could do that better. Come here, Dan.
Yeah, and Gus Bradley was just hired by Vegas, and that was also brought up in the Chargers group chat, and because they were all saying, oh, Gus Bradley sucks, and I was like, look, you guys, if you had watched the Falcons as close as I did, you wouldn't be saying Dan Quinn could be good. But some people came back and said, oh, Dan Quinn was part of the Legion of Boom. But I think the reason I bring this up is because this is interesting. Both Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley run this cover three system, and they don't pressure the quarterback enough. They try to keep things in front of them, but it's really an outdated system, and it's now been exposed twice by the Patriots in 2 Super Bowls against the Falcons, but also
against the Seahawks.
When Dan Quinn, I mean, think about this: that Dan Quinn was with the Seahawks when the Patriots came back, and then he goes to the Falcons when the Patriots come back again. I mean, for all the talk of Kyle Shanahan, I mean that's the same story for Dan Quinn. So
Dan Quinn is outdated at this point. Like when he was on the Falcons, he had players. He kept picking players that could not run the zone. They were more man-to-man. Desmond Trufant and Robert Alford are man-to-man corners. Keanu Neal is not really Cam Chancellor, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say it. I love him. He's not Cam Chancellor. Ricardo Allen is no Earl Thomas. These guys are man-to-man players. They don't play the zone like that.
Yeah, and a lot of it had to do. A lot of the success in Seattle, I would say, had more to do with personnel than it did with scheme. Because I mean, it was a good fit, but
it was a good fit. But like, you look at the comparisons when he was with the Legion of Boom. Richard Sherman, Desmond Trufant ain't no Richard Sherman. Byron Maxwell when he was good. Robert Alford commits pass interference like fucking crazy. That's not happening. Earl Thomas, come on.
And the linebackers. I mean, KJ Wright. I mean, before Earl Thomas, had whatever happened off the field. Just I don't know.
He was a top 10 free safety.
His range at the safety position was, I don't know, maybe Ed Reed was similar, but his ability, I guess, to like close on balls where the corners were beat and make up for the mistakes of other players, right? Like normally he's a unique player in terms of his ability to cover ground, and then also the pass rush, especially with Michael Bennett. I mean,
you had Michael Bennett, Bobby Wagner was holding the middle, Malcolm Smith was on the right. Like this defense was already set for him. Like he had to come to Atlanta and rebuild everything. Like the best defensive player was Grady Jarrett and Deion Jones.
Right, and cover three has holes. Any zone defense really has holes if the quarterback has enough time. I don't know if obviously the Broncos lost to the Super Bowl in 2015, in 2013 rather. But I don't know if you remember 2014, the regular season game they played that went to overtime between Denver and Seattle in Seattle, and it was a Seahawks walk-off win. Now, for much of that game, Denver couldn't do anything because Peyton Manning didn't have any time. And when they were down and he had to go deep, he bought some time in the pocket, and they hit a few big plays to Emmanuel Sanders on the post wheel combination. Now the post wheel combination, and there are others, is pretty much one of the biggest cover three beaters out there. And they wanted to run that in the Super Bowl against Seattle because if you have time, you occupy. Think about your corner is playing 1/3 of the field. If he's occupied by the post and the wheel route comes in behind him, you have a wide open receiver running down the sideline. So if they had time up front, they wanted to run that play and attack that cover three, but the pass rush was so good Peyton Manning didn't have any time. So, but you've seen it. Yeah, I mean, and if you don't have that kind of pass rush, and pass rush can cover for a lot of folks, but if you don't have that kind of 4-man pass rush, it's not going to work. So yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn, and just considering how bad this defense was already. And it seems like they want to. This was the worst hire they could have made, I think, other than maybe Matt Patricia. I mean, it seems like they just want to make it worse. So
just wait. Maybe Matt Patricia will be the offensive coordinator.
It's just painful. It's just painful to think about how bad this Cowboys defense is going to be. And a lot of the people I was arguing with against were saying, "Oh, well, it'll be better than Mike Nolan." I'm like, I don't think it will be better than Mike Nolan. I think
I thought Mike Nolan did a good job.
Mike Nolan has been in the league for 30 years. Okay, you don't be in the league for 30 years if you suck. Now. A problem with Nolan's scheme was that it was too complicated. So I think they just, for the players, I think they just went the total opposite direction and said, let's get a scheme that's super simple and doesn't do anything. But the problem is that's not a good scheme. So
it's simple, but it doesn't do anything.
But it doesn't work. Yeah. So.
But whatever. It's the Cowboys' problem now. The Falcons have interviewed so many people. They're still interviewing people, and hopefully they don't screw this one up.
Well, they interviewed Bieniemy. I don't know.
Apparently he bombed his interview.
Yeah. No. This is actually pretty surprising because he's been spoken of incredibly highly in the league, and
people love him. I guess he just cracked under pressure. So,
well, the article from one of the SB Nation Falcons sites I read said that, and we talked about this earlier in the season that the Falcons really want to hire a minority coach, and because of that, they were hoping more than anything that Bieniemy would work. So if there was a place for Bieniemy, it would probably be there. So for them to come out and say he underwhelmed in the interview, I think that's not a. He could fix it. I mean, it's just one. Maybe
He might honestly second interviews. There's a reason why you do second interviews.
Right. Maybe
So
the fit
take
wasn't
it.
there. Maybe the fit wasn't there, but it's not. It's not a good sign. It's not a good first sign for him.
No, it's not. One last note I would like to get to before we wrap things up.
Mm-hmm.
Deshaun Watson wants out of Houston.
I mean, this was one of those things that, I saw people in my group chat talking about, like, who's going to trade for him, and I'm thinking to myself, that's just gossip. Deshaun Watson, that's off season. Deshaun Watson's not going to get traded. But then I looked at the Adam Schefter report, and there's real frustration. Now we know. I think this goes back to the culture at the Houston organization. The McNairs, was it Bob McNair?
Something like that.
Yeah, I almost said Steve McNair, but that's the quarterback. Right?
No, I wasn't. I think it's Bob.
No, Steve McNair is great. Bob McNair, I think he died earlier this year. His son Cal is in charge. But Bob McNair, when this leaked transcript of the Kaepernick collusion thing came out, he had some of the more egregious and upsetting comments out there. I mean, and look, all the NFL owners supported Trump outside of, again, the aforementioned two, but even Robert Kraft, who is still supported Trump, he even came out and said, well, the president's trying to divide us, and we can't. He in this discussion stood up for the players. Bob McNair, I think there were two things that came to mind that he said. He said that you can't let the inmates run the prison.
Oh yeah,
the inmates being the players, and the prison being the owner. So still sort of that kind of old school mentality. And by the way, social justice is very important to Deshaun Watson. So there was that, and then he also said, you gotta tell your hombres out there to stop kneeling to get this thing taken care of. And it's like, hombres, excuse me. So that's also a little patronizing. So the McNairs, and then earlier this year they fired. They also hired Bill O'Brien. We know all about that.
Well, they hired him and fired him.
Earlier this year, they fired one of the only female assistants in the department. In I think it was either the scouting department or it was some sort of coach, and she was really well liked. And they released and said it's not a culture fit, which is pretty hilarious looking at what's happening now. So this is an organization that, like the Dallas Cowboys, has some issues. And if this stuff. You can say this stuff doesn't matter, it's politics, but the players pay attention to this, and it causes.
No, if the player doesn't want to play, like, you clearly have to have like the right mindset with the players,
right.
And if you're not going to defend your players, why do the players want to be there?
Exactly, and Watson was upset with this season, as he should be. I mean, he's a franchise quarterback, and he just had his best season on a 4-win team. It was a wasted season for him and J.J. Watt. We saw on NFL films, I think there was them two talking about it, saying this year sucked, man.
Yeah, J.J. Watt walked up to him and says, we wasted one of your years.
Well, exactly. So they're tired. I mean, we've seen the passion that, J.J. Watt, as opposed to these Steelers we've seen the passion that J.J. Watt had and how personally he takes losing. And so I think Deshaun Watson wanted more involvement in the process. And you can say, oh, he's a young player or he should do what he's told. But I think the way he's played
he deserves every right. If he doesn't want to be there, get out.
I think he's earned that input, and his frustration is that they weren't giving him that input, that he wanted them to interview Eric Bieniemy, and they refused. I think they have now said they will, but they missed the opening period, so they have to wait till after the Super Bowl. That was reported by Ian Rappaport, but I'm not sure it's confirmed by any other source yet. But he wanted them to interview Eric Bieniemy. They chose not to, and then it was the hiring of the general manager Nick Caserio, who was with the Patriots, who have been horrible at drafting in recent years, and that was the hiring that really frustrated him. And I think the reports are that it was less about this specific hire than it was about the fact that they did it behind his back. They didn't seek his input. And remember, this is a guy that last year he found out about the DeAndre Hopkins trade on social media, and he had to find out about this on social media.
Yeah, he doesn't get any notes set up from anyone on that team.
So he's frustrated about being left out from the decision-making process. And there's also the fact that the Texans hired a search firm. They have these consulting firms that do this to look for a general manager, and they had two recommendations, both people of color. The first was, I believe, what's his name, Louis Riddick, and I don't remember who the second was, but they hired this firm, and then they chose to ignore the recommendations of this firm entirely and just go their own direction and hire Nick Caserio. So you can't have your franchise quarterback pissed at you, and Deshaun Watson's not a diva, like we know that. I mean, he's fiery, but he's not a he's not a me guy. And the reports are that
Nothing that he is angry about is like showing that he's a diva. It's showing that he just has values and he doesn't like the values that are here.
The reports are that he's from Adam. I'm quoting. The reports are from Adam Schefter that he's furious, and that on a scale of 0 to 10, in terms of how angry he was when DeAndre Hopkins was traded, he was a 2, and now he's a 10. So it's a story to watch because something that seemed insane when I first heard about it is actually turning out to be very real. And this is how you don't run a franchise, and this is how you don't treat your star quarterback.
We're gonna have to see what happens with the Houston though. Like, they've got a lot of work to do at this point, and clearly, Deshaun Watson does not want to be there. It's clear. So you're gonna have to restart. You're gonna have to reload everyone. You're probably gonna want to trade for JJ too and get some value out of that.
Well, we'll see if it can be salvaged. I mean, he did sign a big contract, so McNair has some work to do.
They got a lot of work to do.
We'll see if they do interview Bieniemy. We'll see if they reach out to Watson, talk to him person to person. Maybe they can salvage this relationship because it's not easy to trade him.
No, it's not gonna be easy at all. But he's not gonna want to be there anymore.
Yeah, well, let's see. Interesting story to watch for sure.
All right, sir. That is going to wrap up our time here. What would you like to plug?
Yeah, you can check me out on my blog, footballck.wordpress.com. You can also check me out at lafbnetwork.com. That stands for LA Football Network. That's lafbnetwork.com. I will post on my blog links to this podcast. You can also find me on LinkedIn, CaryKrongard. If you want to collaborate on content or freelance writing opportunities, just tell me why you're reaching out first, because if I don't know you, I'm not going to accept you. Super Wildcard Weekend in the books. Excited to see what happens next week and be back here and talk about it.
Yep. So make sure to join us next week when we talk about what happens in the divisional round. We'll look at the conference championships, talk about the other sports. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We've been trying to get better on. We're making some YouTube videos, and we are on Twitch on Sundays. We do live reactions to some highlights, and make sure to keep up with all of us there. Make sure you stay safe and have a good day.